Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're looking at a story where a single workplace meltdown, well, it turns out to be just the tip of a massive iceberg. We're going to uncover years of trauma, burnout, and a really painful cycle of hurt that gets passed from one person to the next. So this is where it all ends up, a total catastrophe at work. But this explainer isn't just about what happened. No, we're going to trace it all the way back. We're going to unravel this really complex web to figure out why it all went so wrong.
All right, so let's jump right in. We need to figure out what kicked this whole crisis off. And it starts with something pretty simple, just a basic interaction that completely spirals out of control.
Okay, so the person at the heart of this story, they have a live-in job and they live by themselves. And a coworker starts asking all these questions, really persistent personal stuff. Why don't you go on vacation? Why do you live alone? What might have just been friendly curiosity, to them, it felt invasive, like they were under a microscope.
So naturally, they get defensive. They're worried about gossip. They want to protect their privacy, so they just shut down. They get really vague. But the coworker, he takes it personally. He complains that they're not talkative, and suddenly our narrator is seen as unapproachable. And that just cranks up the tension, right?
And wow, just look at how fast this all went south. It goes from a little discomfort to being mean. And that meanness, it turns into these furious email complaints. And then the final domino falls. And it's not just one person getting fired. Nope. The coworker, his son, the boss, and the person who wrote the emails, everyone's gone.
The fallout from this was just devastating and immediate. The coworker didn't just lose their income, they lost their home. Can you imagine? And for the person who sent those emails, they're left carrying this incredible weight of guilt for all the damage they caused, even if they never, ever meant for it to get this bad.
But here's the thing. A meltdown this huge, it doesn't just come out of nowhere. It wasn't in a vacuum. This was like a pressure cooker that had been on the stove for years, just building and building. And the source of all that heat? It was family.
And they admit it. In their own words, for years, they've been verbally and emotionally abusive to their own family. And the result? Now the family is scared of them. They resent them. And those relationships are just stretched to the breaking point.
So this creates this really painful stalemate. The family wants connection, they're demanding it. Spend time with us, talk to us, hang out. But our narrator feels completely hollowed out, totally burnt out. They have zero patience or energy left to give. And that just creates this awful cycle of disappointment and anger.
Now, one of the main sources of that toxicity, a key player in this whole family web, was an abusive cousin named David, a character who just seemed to make all the dysfunction that much worse.
I mean, David's behavior is like a textbook on emotional abuse. He gaslights, completely denying he ever said hurtful things. He tears down personal choices, calling exercise pussy shit. He throws out these cruel, cutting remarks like, "You are a homeless guy now." And here's the kicker, the most toxic part of all. The family absolutely worships him. They enable it, which just reinforces his behavior and isolates anyone who dares to push back.
So this just raises a huge question, right? Why would someone put up with an abusive cousin and then later become abusive themselves? Well, to understand that, we have to dig even deeper. We have to go all the way back to a really formative childhood experience.
This is really the heart of it. A person doesn't just wake up one day and decide it's okay for people to disrespect them. That's a learned belief. And for our narrator, it was learned at a Jewish summer camp.
You see, this camp wasn't just a place where bullying happened. It was a place where it was practically engineered. The owner and the staff, they actively cultivated this social hierarchy. They empowered an inner group, a popular clique, to bully and demean other kids with zero consequences.
And this normalization of aggression even had a name, dunking. The owner actually encouraged this, or boys would physically grab girls and just throw them into the water. It was all framed as some kind of fun camp tradition, but think about the lesson it was teaching, a really dangerous one about consent and boundaries.
This whole toxic culture, which even included gaslighting kids who complained, was something the owner had brought over from her past in the Soviet Union. But it was a terrible, terrible fit in its new setting. It created an environment that actively damaged the social and emotional growth of any kid who wasn't in that popular group.
So that single experience at camp,
It became the blueprint for a lifetime of pain. It literally created the vicious cycle of hurt that we're seeing play out, where the victim eventually becomes the one causing the pain. And here it is, the devastating chain reaction. It all starts with the camp trauma, which made being disrespected feel normal. That normalization made it easier to then tolerate a toxic family. The stress from both of those things led to this profound burnout, which in turn fueled lashing out. And right there, the person who was once the victim becomes a source of emotional abuse themselves. The cycle is tragically complete. And we see this cycle playing out in the most heartbreaking ways. They admit to neglecting their father, not picking up his calls, knowing it makes him feel lonely and sick. It's an act that comes from a place of complete burnout, but it just keeps the very same cycle of hurt going. And that brings us to today. After all of it, the firings, the family fighting, the soul searching, they're left with this heavy, almost crushing self-awareness of these patterns.
But this new awareness reveals this incredible paradox. They avoid their family because they're terrified the visits will drain whatever energy they have left. But they also admit that when they do connect with them, it actually makes them feel better, more energized.
And this is where the story leaves us, with this final, really provocative thought. When you finally understand the roots of your own pain, when you see your own role in this cycle of hurt, is that awareness a crushing burden? Or is it the necessary, painful, and maybe, just maybe, the freeing first step to finally breaking that cycle for good?